You've made a decision you regretted almost immediately. Not because you were careless. Because you were using the wrong tool for the job. Around 2,300 years ago in Athens, when the question of how to live well was treated as the most serious question a person could ask, Aristotle watched students, politicians, and ordinary people make terrible choices over and over again. Brilliant people, educated people, people who had read all the right things and could argue philosophy for hours. And he noticed something that nobody before him had named cleanly. They weren't confused about the facts. They were confused about what kind of thinking the situation required. The ancient world had plenty of advice about knowledge. Study more. Think harder. Seek wisdom from the right teachers. The assumption underneath all of it was that better information leads to better decisions. Fill your head with enough of the right content, and the correct choice will become obvious. Aristotle looked at this and found it incomplete. Not wrong, just missing something essential. We still make the same mistake today, by the way. We call it doing our research. We read articles, watch videos, gather data, and then find ourselves just as confused at the moment of decision as we were before. Sound familiar? What he saw that most people walked past was that knowing what is true and knowing what to do are two different cognitive operations. They require different mental equipment. And if you bring the wrong equipment to the problem, you will get a bad result, no matter how intelligent you are. He gave names to 3 different types of knowledge, and understanding the difference between them changes how you think about almost every significant choice you face. The first he called episteme. This is knowledge of things that cannot be otherwise. Mathematical truths, the laws of physics, the fact that all humans are mortal. This kind of knowledge is about the permanent, the universal, the provable. You verify it through logic and evidence. Once established, it doesn't change based on who you are or what situation you're in. The second he called tekton. This is craft knowledge, the kind a carpenter has when shaping wood, or a doctor has when treating a patient. It's practical skill developed through training and repetition. A craftsman doesn't reinvent the wheel every time they pick up a tool. They draw on accumulated technique. You learn tekton through practice, through apprenticeship, through doing the thing enough times that it becomes instinct. Now, here is where it gets genuinely useful. The third type he called phronesis. It's usually translated as practical wisdom. And it's the one almost no school teaches and almost no self-help book accurately describes. Phronesis is the ability to perceive what a specific situation actually requires and respond in a way that is good not just technically but ethically, appropriately, humanly right. It's not a rulebook. Rules break down at the edges of real situations. It's not a formula. Formulas work when variables are fixed, and human life refuses fixed variables. Phronesis is closer to a cultivated sensitivity, the ability to read a moment, weigh competing values, and act well under uncertainty without the luxury of perfect information. Aristotle believed this was the master capacity, the one that coordinates all the others. You might have brilliant analytical knowledge and precise technical skill, and still make a wreck of your actual life if you lack the ability to judge what matters most in the specific situation in front of you. Think about a time you made a decision using the wrong type of thinking. You treated a question that required phronesis as if it were a math problem. You tried to calculate your way through something that needed judgment. You made a spreadsheet for a decision that was fundamentally about values. Or the reverse. You went entirely on instinct in a situation that actually needed careful analysis, and told yourself it was wisdom when it was just impatience. Both errors are extremely common, and the cost of each one tends to be paid slowly, in the form of a life that doesn't quite match what you intended. Here's the specific way this plays out in decisions most people face regularly. You're trying to decide whether to leave a job, end a relationship, move to a different city, or commit to a direction you're uncertain about. And you do what seems reasonable. You research, you make lists of pros and cons, you talk to people, you gather more information, hoping that at some point the right answer will become clear. But notice something. Those techniques are tools of episteme and techne. They're built for problems where more information resolves the uncertainty. And the decisions that matter most in a human life are almost never like that. They're not uncertain because you lack data. They're uncertain because they involve competing values, because the future is genuinely unknowable, because who you are and who you want to become are both implicated in the choice. Aristotle would say that what you need in those moments is not more information. What you need is better judgment. And judgment is not something you download. It develops through practice, through reflection on past decisions, through honest examination of what you actually value versus what you tell yourself you value. He had a method for building it, not a shortcut. A practice. He said you start by asking what the good person would do. Not a perfect theoretical person, but a genuinely wise, practically experienced human being you respect. What would they notice about this situation that you might be missing? What would they weigh most heavily? This question forces you outside your own habitual perspective, which is almost always where the blind spot lives. Then you ask what virtue the situation calls for. Not in a moralistic sense, in a diagnostic one. Is this a situation that primarily requires courage, restraint, honesty, patience? Different situations call different virtues to the front. Identifying which one is primary helps you see what kind of action is actually appropriate here, versus what your anxiety or pride or habit is pushing you toward. And finally, he said, you consider the mean. Between excess and deficiency, where does the genuinely appropriate response sit? Not the extreme in either direction, but the calibrated response that fits this specific context. Courageous but not reckless. Honest but not brutal. Generous but not self-destructive. This framework doesn't produce certainty. Aristotle was too honest to promise certainty about human affairs. What it produces is better judgment over time. The kind where you look back on a decision made years ago and recognize that it was made from your actual values rather than your momentary fears, and that even if the outcome was hard, the decision itself was sound. That distinction matters more than people realize. Outcomes are partly luck. The quality of the decision is entirely yours. He spent his life watching people confuse those two things. Calling a good decision bad because it produced a difficult outcome. Calling a poor decision wise because it happened to work out. The confusion makes it impossible to learn from experience because you're evaluating the wrong variable. Better decisions don't come from being smarter or more informed. They come from knowing which kind of thinking the moment requires, and having developed the judgment to apply it well. He gave us the vocabulary for that. We just keep reaching for the calculator when the situation needs something else entirely. Subscribe if this made you think differently. The next one goes into how Aristotle said to actually build the habit of good judgment in daily life.